Alright, cool. So this is where we'll get into Journey of the Magi by T.S. Eliot, and we're going to discuss, as we have for the other poems, how it demonstrates both the physical and the psychological impacts that stemmed from modernism. So basically the Journey of the Magi, just as a quick recap, is a parody of the journey of the three wise men to the birth of Jesus Christ, and obviously because of Eliot's context, it's been altered quite significantly, and rather than a celebration of that journey, what we see is Eliot instead subverts that traditional biblical story and highlights the decline of religion, and highlights how in the modernist era there was less of a reliance on religion as a moral compass, and instead there's this lack of meaning and generally a sense of hopelessness that pervades. So looking in terms of the physical sense, what we see here is as the three wise men journey through, they find that the cities are hostile and towns unfriendly. So we have a personification of obviously the cities and the towns to indicate, again, to link back to that contextual idea of the modern cityscape as very unwelcoming and as quite drab and lacking in vitality, and generally not enjoyable for the individual. So that definitely comes through, and we also have this as representative of a microcosm of Eliot's society. So clearly he's representing the cityscape that he has personally experienced. We also have the poem start in the very dead of winter, so we have here the symbolism, where again, linking back to Eliot's Subversion and pull away from the Romantic era, he rather than creating this image of natural beauty, he instead creates a very lifeless image, and I guess this really links back to the pessimistic nature of the time, and this feeling of general hopelessness that pervades into the surrounding environment. We also have the men cursing and grumbling and running away and wanting their liquor and women. So on a religious journey, you would expect them to be like morally upheld, but instead we have this like accumulation of their like unethical or corrupt nature, which really displays the selfish nature of the individuals at the time. So I think this links back to the whole idea of the city as unwelcoming and as increasingly disorienting for the individual, and what we see here through this combined imagery of the city, of the dead winter, and the men cursing and grumbling is this real detachment and this real sense of resentment, I guess, almost towards the cityscape and the people within the city, so the surrounding society. Another key quote that you can use is the asyndeton of the camels that go sore-footed and refractory, and this creates this premeditated multiplicity, which suggests that the pain experienced on this journey is actually extended beyond what is described in these three words. So you really get a sense in terms of the context of the general dissatisfaction and the general angst that permeated through the time. So now we can move on to the psychological impacts that stem from the modernist context. So obviously we've discussed this before, but there was this lack of information, or this feeling of meaninglessness within the world, and sort of this sentiment that the world was now filled with like meaningless meaning almost. And that really comes through where the persona says, but there was no information. So first off, notice that it starts off on a disjunctive, so already there's this like a sense of unsurety because of the but, and then we've also got the high modality because there was no information, right? So there's this, it really reflects the feeling within society where there was a lack of understanding or of knowledge, and it demonstrates that, modernist context where people felt very lost, and there was, and I guess Eliot creates a really, really ambivalent tone in order to reflect this. Now going further into the context, as there was the pull away from religion because, following World War I, there was the loss of hope, and there was a lot of anger and confusion as to why, World War I had occurred. How could it happen if there was a higher power that was supposed to be controlling the world? And we see a juxtaposition of birth and death where the persona says, I had just seen birth and death, but have thought they were different, right? Also notice that it's in past past tense, and it implies this new understanding of the connection between birth and death, and it almost implies that in order to escape the unconsciousness of the modern world, one must die and be born again. And I guess that links to almost the concept of reincarnation. But I think the key thing to take from here is that there's this feeling of hopelessness, and there's this feeling that there's almost no escape of the modernist context and its angst and its anxiety. And then we also have an oxymoron used, where the persona says, I should be glad of another death. It gives connotations of relief at the thought of death, and it symbolizes how, again, the persona, as a result of their psychological state, which stems from the impacts of modernism and the uncertainty that arose within that period, leads the persona to almost welcome death and to think that, I guess, it will provide security, which is currently not provided in their modernist world. And I guess it can also symbolize the persona's deliverance from their sin through the sacrifice of God. But what's really interesting within those last two quotes is, rather than, the three wise men seeing Jesus and that being a really fulfilling occasion, what it becomes is, it's quite ironic, because it instead creates more questions, and instead we see this pull away from religion, where they actually question the whole concept of birth and death, rather than, blindly following a certain faith. So that just sums up Journey of the Magi for you. Obviously there are more quotes you can pick from. Those are just a couple of the key ones I thought could be very fitting. But obviously for the physical, you've got the whole image of the cityscape, which is very unwelcoming. And then you've got the psychological, this lack of meaning and this constant questioning, and like the turbulence within one's own mind, which I think both are really reflective of the modernist era, and the various contextual factors that led to this whole sense of uncertainty and this questioning of previously really, really strongly believed structures or narratives.